Welcome to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, your guide to future tech trends and innovation in a language you understand. Now, over to your host, Neil Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. And today, class, it's time for another blockchain crypto education lesson today, because I want to introduce you all to NEM, N-E-M, which stands for the New Economy Movement. And it's a dual-layer blockchain that was originally written in Java and launched in 2015. And the NEM mainnet supports multiple ledgers and has a NEM smart asset system where nodes on the NEM blockchain process API calls. And its native currency, XEM, is harvested during a proof of importance algorithm. Now, today's guest is Dave Hodgson, who is the director and co-founder of NEM Ventures, which is the venture capital and investment arm of the NEM blockchain ecosystem, which serves to manage the NEM Community Fund. But enough of my ramblings. The purpose of this show is not to baffle you with tech jargon and acronyms. I'm going to bring somebody on the show today who's going to talk about all things NEM in a language that everybody can understand. So buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to Mexico so we can speak with Dave Hodgson, who is the director and co-founder at NEM Ventures. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Dave. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thanks, Neil, and thanks for having us here. So I'm one of three co-founders of a blockchain investment company based on the NEM blockchain. So NEM is one of the top 20 crypto coins and is a protocol level blockchain, which means other projects build on top of NEM. Before I got involved with NEM Ventures, I spent best part of the last 15 years doing a combination of different management consulting and IT architecture roles that saw me working through various different startups, including one of my own. And I spent several years doing public cloud implementations for large enterprises, basically helping guide them through that process. So that kind of background, naturally you end up in blockchain at some point. And I was working as a CIO for an energy company at the time, and we were doing an options analysis of various different blockchains to do peer-to-peer energy trading. So from there, I ended up getting involved with the NEM blockchain, and ultimately NEM Ventures spawned from that engagement.
Now, some people listening will know all about the new economy movement, the blockchain ecosystem, the NEM cryptocurrency, and equally others will have no awareness at all. So the fact that NEM Ventures is a venture capital investments arm of the NEM blockchain ecosystem could quickly confuse listeners. So just to set the scene, can you tell me a little bit more about the relationship between these two different arms of NEM?
Yeah, sure thing. And just beforehand, Neil, I tend to allow acronyms to slip in every now and again just because of being around it all day, every day. So if anything needs further elaboration, just shout. But basically, the NEM project in itself is a blockchain, as I said before, protocol level blockchain. So projects build on top of NEM. Now that blockchain is developed by a team of core developers who, in combination with the community and a couple of other entities that I'll explain in a second, drive basically all the feature requirements and the release schedules, etc. So the development team create the underlying blockchain protocol. There's a large community around that blockchain, and the blockchain went live in 2015. The development work started in 2014. So it's one of the longer running chains. Since that time, it's been up 100% of the time, 24/7, and the community are very actively engaged with it. Now, the community has a strong democratic process in how what are called reserve funds are allocated. So essentially when the blockchain started, some tokens were held back from the initial distribution to allow the funding of various different activities like marketing, venture capital investment, that type of stuff. So within that ecosystem, we now have two directly relevant entities and a third one, which is a very active supporter and participant in the ecosystem as well. So the first one of those is the NEM Foundation. They founded back in late 2016 and originally had the purpose of basically brand awareness and communicating what NEM does, why enterprises should look at NEM, helping drive the public image effectively of the community and just being a bit of a voice for the community. At the end of last year, the foundation went through its first council election, so they have now pivoted slightly with the new council towards being brand awareness and the training and partnership management. From the foundation, you've got NEM Ventures, which is ourselves. We invest in and provide support to projects within the ecosystem or companies that expand the ecosystem in some way. So that could be anything from very early stage startup that needs seed funding to Series A round type investments, which will be typically larger tickets for more established companies with revenue streams already proven. And then beyond ourselves, there is also a private entity in Japan called Tech Bureau. Now, you don't hear as much about Tech Bureau in the English-speaking world, but in Japan, they're rather large, and they basically fund the development of a private enterprise-grade blockchain that they have branded as Mijin. It's based on the NEM core protocol, and they release that development work as open source through the core development team to keep the development work ongoing. So really, you've got the NEM core development team, which builds the protocol, the NEM Foundation, which handles a lot of product development and brand awareness, NEM Ventures, which covers as the investment arms and sort of financial trading and that kind of stuff, and then Tech Bureau, which have the private enterprise license. So the ecosystem itself is getting quite large, and it now takes me a lot longer than it used to try and explain, but that's it in a nutshell.
I have read your proposal online, and I know it's very early days for you guys, but just to ensure everyone is on the same page, what stage are you at right now with NEM Ventures?
Yeah, so that proposal was approved by the community back in September with a 93% yes majority. So we got a fairly strong mandate at that stage. We've now incorporated a company legally in Gibraltar with all of the fun and games that goes around being cryptocurrency-based investment funds, so things like setting up bank accounts and all the really boring legal stuff. We have processed a large backlog of proposals from when it was a community grant scheme. So there was about, I think it was 26 proposals in there. We have now processed every single one of those and accepted another 30 to 40 new ones. I think the actual number rounds out about 35. So if you look on the proposal now, we're between the Q2 and Q3 milestones on the on one of the later pages, but basically we're up and running. We've processed the backlog, and we're now open for business, actively looking for new projects to invest in.
Now, I see that you also recently made an investment. I think it was in an Australian carpooling app, which is called Mobi. Can you tell me more about that, along with any other investments that you've made today?
Yeah, sure. So publicly, we've invested in 2 projects so far, Mobi out of Australia and Vimba in New Zealand. So Mobi were one of the original backlog projects that I mentioned before from when it was a community grant scheme, who proactively engaged with us early in that process to seek seed round funding. So Mobi have an existing app right now, which is helping to facilitate carpooling and ride sharing in Melbourne, and it's expanding out to other cities around Australia. And the idea behind carpooling out in Australia is basically to try and get cars off the road and also increase the social interaction of commuting at a lower cost than taking, for example, a taxi or an Uber, etc. So the Mobi team have already got that application at its minimum viable product stage. They've had a pilot to prove a couple hundred users in Melbourne, and they've now got 3 signed agreements with different universities across Australia to start rolling that out generally. They accept NEM's native cryptocurrency as payment and give a 20% discount if you pay in the cryptocurrency. They're also using a couple of features, or will be using a couple of features that come in the NEM version 2 towards the end of this year, which allow them to operate kind of an escrow-like service. So you get money taken out of your account as a rider when you get in the car, and it doesn't actually get given to the driver until you get out of the car and the trip is confirmed effectively. So it's 2 young guys based out of Darwin in Australia who have spent a bit of time commuting in and out of Melbourne, and I think it was Brisbane, and came up with a solution which is actually quite simple and quite elegant. They just needed some help to get it to scale. So that's the Mobi investment. The second one, as I mentioned, was a company in New Zealand called Vimba. What they do is they allow you to connect your UK or New Zealand bank account directly to their system, send cash to their system, and it will send you back cryptocurrency directly. So you don't need to engage with any cryptocurrency exchanges. It's a very simple process for people who are new to crypto to be onboarded through. And they have a savings product, kind of similar to some of the stuff we see in the UK with the investment trusts or the pension trusts or the unit trusts, where you can set aside, I think it's up to £1,000, maybe £2,000 a month, but you can do it from multiples of about £20 upwards, and just go into regular savings. So they will take that out of your account by standing order every month, and then they'll deliver cryptocurrency back to your wallet. But because they group that purchase up, towards the end of the month, they get a better rate than you would otherwise be able to get if you bought it yourself. And that regular saving obviously allows you to benefit from the prices fluctuating up and down. You just end up with an average price across the year. So it's quite a handy savings scheme. It's a scheme that Vimba have been operating in New Zealand now for several years, and they're just starting to scale. So similar to Mobi, the investment's primarily scaling of a proven concept. They've moved into the UK market at the start of this year, and they're moving into the Australian market towards the end of the year, and then expecting to move to the EU after that. So they've got several industry firsts under their belt already, and they're basically scaling up a system that already works.
And for any startup founders that might be listening, I've got to ask, what sort of projects is NEM Ventures looking to invest in? And are there any specific requirements? And maybe could you possibly walk them through the proposal process? Yeah,
sure, thanks. The first and foremost, or the key tenet really, is that the project has to either be building on the NEM blockchain or in some way be it needs to be very easy to communicate what value it brings to the NEM ecosystem. So we're a community-owned investment fund that invests in NEM projects. So if they're building on anything other than NEM, we're basically not interested. So assuming you can pass that stage gate, the remaining requirements are very similar to traditional finance. So we're looking for a team that has a clear vision and credibility to deliver on that vision. They need to be able to explain it easily and in layman's terms as to why the business opportunity exists and how they're going to realize it. The project needs to be commercially viable. So we're not a grants organization. We are looking to make a financial return on investments, primarily so that we can continue ensuring the sustainability of the fund. Obviously, if we just invest and don't get anything back in return, it's a finite resource, and eventually we can't continue investing in projects. So we take all the profits and we reinvest them in future projects that build on the eco. And that financial return is one way in which we measure the investment. So we are looking for a positive exit at some point, but we also have a slightly wider value judgment on how the project helps to expand the ecosystem or offer services to other projects within the ecosystem, or perhaps contribute open source to the protocol if they've developed a tool that would be useful for someone else. In terms of the process, it's really simple. If you go onto the website, which is nemventures.io, there's a big button on the homepage that says submit a proposal. You go into there, read through that page, but basically you need to sign a non-disclosure agreement, upload a pitch deck, and that will kick the process off. The very next thing that'll happen is we'll send you a shared data room to upload supporting information to, and we would be expecting to see a full business plan, financial forecasts, any other supporting material that you've got, awards, incubators. There's quite a wide variety of stuff that comes in support, but the basic minimums are our pitch deck, business plan, and financial forecasts. And in terms of the type of project, we'll consider anything from very early seed stage, probably earlier than most VCs, because our success is also measured on how well the projects do in the ecosystem. And we'll consider up to about Series A rounds as well. Our typical ticket sizes tend to be in the region of sort of $100,000 to about $700,000, but we can go up as far as $4 million fairly easily. And I also see that NEM is gearing up for the Catapult launch later this year, which will be an upgraded version of the technology. Obviously, you can't reveal too much, but is there anything you can tell me more about that? Obviously, bearing in mind there will be Reddit communities passionately hanging on your every word. Yeah, so we can reveal a fair bit at this stage. So the development's been happening now for must be about 2.5 to 3 years, and the core development team have a release process, which means that they release probably 5 interim stages to the development community. We're currently at stage 4 of that, so the next one is the likely public chain release candidate, which is slated as Elephant, which is due out in a couple of months' time, maybe 3 months' time. We're just trying to organize the exact release dates on that. So the Catapult rewrite is a complete rewrite from the ground up. So the previous version was based on Java. The new version is going to be based on C++. And as I said before, it's a rewrite from the ground up, so all the code is new. It'll be fully open source when it launches later this year, slated for late 2019 at this stage. So the new version has several improvements. It has all of the old features that projects are familiar with that have been building with NEM for the last few years, but it also provides increased speed, better security, better performance in general, and several features that don't exist on other chains. So NEM was the first chain to have on-chain multi-signature control of accounts, which means that, similar to a bank account, more than one person has to sign a transaction for it to happen, otherwise it fails. That now gets expanded out to multi-level, multi-signature, so that's more similar to how an enterprise might use, for example, delegated financial authority, where you might delegate down from the exec level a large budget and then sort of chunk that out into smaller budgets as you get down through the organization. Conceptually, that's how I like to think of it, at least. There's also a concept of something called an aggregate transaction, which is conceptually a little bit more similar to Ethereum smart contracts. It's not quite the same, but it's broadly similar. So you can stack 25 transactions or up to 25 transactions, one on top of the other, and each of those transactions has to happen in order for the entire transaction to complete. Otherwise, they all roll back. So you might use that for example, if I was going to pay the transaction fees on behalf of one of my clients who wants to make a transaction, it would be an aggregate transaction of two. So the client would initiate a transaction, then I'd initiate another one to pay the fees for them, so that I don't have the client basically doesn't have to care about the underlying protocol, and I can kind of hide that from them. They get all the benefit from it, but none of the complexity. So those two are now committed and in the code base and will be there from the Elephant release, I believe. There's multiple other features that are in there which are helpful to people, but there's a lot of detail in there, so it's probably easier for that discussion to happen slowly. The NEM Foundation are producing a Catapult series right now, so if you go to nem.io, which is the foundation's website, they are publishing regular articles. I think it's weekly, possibly even more frequently than that, covering each of the new features, and I think that they've got a series of about 10 announcements lined up now to start over the next few weeks.
Now, in light of the recent crypto winter, we've all heard about early adopters and how they may have lost money by investing early, but we don't always get to hear about what it's like on the inside. So I'm curious, have you found that interest in NEM and projects had actually lessened during that time, or do you find that technology is independent from market price?
It's a very good question, and it's not one that there's an easy answer to. So our interest in terms of projects that want to build on the underlying technology because blockchain is the right technology for them, that's increased for sure. The number of projects that are actually kind of building behind the scenes quietly that you don't really see in public because all of the hype around the currency price has died down. It makes it a lot easier for those projects to focus on building a real business on top of a real product. However, particularly in the 2017, 2018 fundraising hype cycle, if you want to call it that, where people were raising millions of dollars in minutes using ICOs, that kind of interest has definitely died down. So people are not using NEM, Ethereum, or any other chains really as a successful fundraising mechanism the same way as they were before, where it was possible to fill a sale of 70 or 80 million in a couple of hours. And I think that's a good thing, to be honest. It was at a point where it was just a bit too excitable. Regulation hadn't really quite caught up, so there wasn't real clarity for the companies who were doing those raises, and some of them are now being investigated by various different regulators to make sure that they've been acting within the law. So that side has definitely died off and matured in a positive way. And the interest of companies to build on the underlying technologies is still there. When I go to conferences and chat to new projects, there's still just as many, if not more, who are looking at building on underlying technologies. And there's new technologies have come out since that hype cycle as well, which we work with and alongside. And yeah, they're doing things that weren't possible to do 2 or 3 years ago.
And another big theme in the blockchain industry is this shift away from big ideas to focus on real-world use cases. So you are right in the heart of this space. So what, in your opinion, is the single greatest use case or application of blockchain that you've seen?
That's a really good question. So I don't think there is one single greatest use case, to be honest. I think there are a lot of combined use cases that provide an overall outcome or set of aims. So within different industries, there are different use cases that make more sense. And obviously within the financial industry or the fintech industry, there's a huge amount of investment in pretty much any kind of new technology, but particularly in blockchain, because it is disrupting the financial services sector already. So the uptake and the types of uses there have had more investment and therefore have solved more problems or are solving more problems in that space. Whether they become the single greatest use case or not is really hard to say, because if you shift to the energy industry, for example, equally you have a requirement to track where energy flows around the grid and in which direction it's going, whether your solar panels are involved or you're buying it from a coal-fired power station or whatever. actually that has much more of a national infrastructure impact if it gets adopted by, for the likes of, for example, the likes of Ofgem or Nexon in the UK, whereas the financial one is more likely to be, at least short term, isolated more to the institutional type players or to people who want to make quick value transfer across borders. So you see that use case come up quite frequently, and it has been there since day one of Bitcoin. I mean, it's one of the primary reasons that it was created by Satoshi. So certainly that value transfer and the use of it in finance is a massive use case. Whether it's the single greatest one, I guess we'll find out in a few years.
Now, in a space where conversations are always around roadmaps, white papers and partnerships, I've got to ask, I mean, what is next for NEM Ventures, and anything that you can reveal about what you've got planned for the next 12 months?
Yeah, so our next 12 months are fairly well planned out now, and we're quite open with what we're doing. So NEM across the board, all of the entities, the ecosystem, the community, basically it's Catapult for this year. So Catapult will get out the door. We're trying to find interesting projects that are commercially viable who want to build on Catapult or are already building on Catapult, so that we can help provide them not just with financing, but also with mentoring, introductions to networks, connection with other partners, etc. Basically, the ecosystem is coming together around the new technology launch to ensure it's successful. And obviously, we're playing our part in that. So outside of that, there's a few ancillary things that we're doing to help support some of the other entities. For example, we're running an internal trading desk now, which allows us to help some of the larger liquidations come through our existing structure, so that we can basically try and avoid large dumps of tokens going onto the market where they don't need to. So, for example, the NEM Foundations and NEM Studios and NEM Ventures all have our budgets in XEM. We actually need dollars in order to pay really boring things like electricity bills and computers and stuff. But the process by which we do that is the same for all three of us. So we're trying to assist the other two with the partnerships we've put in place already for that, just because we're just a little bit further ahead on that requirement. It's predominantly ecosystem support in that side, and the other side is backing Catapult and projects that are building on it.
But before I let you go, could I also just ask that you remind the listeners of where they can find you online, join your community, or equally if we have a startup founder building something on NEM that wants to contact a member of your team, what's the best way of doing that?
Yeah, so the easiest way is through our website. It's nemventures.io. Alternatively, you can come to the Telegram group, which is one of the most frequently used chat programs in crypto in general, or blockchain in general, which is at NEM Ventures, and that's on Telegram. Alternatively, if there's just a general desire to get involved in the community, the nem.io website, which is the NEM Foundation, is a really good entry point to that. It has a lot of materials on what NEM does, how you can use it, who's doing what with it, all that kind of stuff. But very happy for people to contact us through our website, and we can help signpost them to the right place.
And your Telegram channel, has it got any When Moon guys in there, or do you push them somewhere else?
Not on my one, because I'm an admin.
I love it.
We do have a price talk channel though, which is I think it's at NEM Traders. So that's where those kind of conversations tend to happen.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast today. It's something I'm going to be following very closely, and following the progress of Catapult as well later this year. So I'd love to stay in touch, maybe get you back on later in the year, see how that journey's going. But more than anything, just a big thank you for joining me today.
Oh, thanks for having us, Neil. I'm always happy to come on and chat. Yeah, we'd love to have a follow-up at some point in the future.
There were so many interesting value bombs dropped by Dave there, from hearing about the sort of projects that NEM Ventures look to invest in, and also, of course, hearing how NEM is gearing up for that Catapult launch later this year too. And it's also interesting to hear how, along with receiving funds from NEM Ventures, successful projects that align with the ethos of the NEM community will be provided with expertise from the team, as well as incentivise the open sourcing of non-commercially sensitive software. So the big winners appear to be benefiting the creativity, productivity and accessibility of other projects in the NEM ecosystem, which has got to be good for the adoption problem that we keep hearing about. Well, that's my takeaway. I'm like way off the mark here. I don't have all the answers. And one thing I always say is there are no experts out there. We're living in a world full of crypto experts that seemingly disappeared during the crypto winter and are just starting to show their face again. But one thing I'm learning is there are no experts, and we all learn from each other, and we all have different insights and different areas of expertise. So I suspect that between everyone listening out there and me talking into this mic and today's guest, we can piece together the full jigsaw. So please, this is where I invite you to share your opinions by emailing me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, tweet me at Neil C. Hughes, or drop by my website, techblogwriter.co.uk, where you'll also find over 100 interviews with other leaders in the blockchain and crypto space, and nearly 900 interviews with tech leaders from multiple industries. So remember, this show is not about me, it's not about the guest, it's about you listening. So this is an open invitation. If you want to come on the show, if you just want to share a few thoughts or insights, please send those messages across. So all that's left for me to say is a big thank you to each and every one of you for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Until next time, remember, technology is best when it brings people together.